Morning, Chris. How are you?
Morning, Rod. I'm all right. Apologies to listeners if I sound tired and a sore throat. I was in London yesterday, seeing the sights, seeing the lights, and I feel tired today, it's fair to say. And for some reason, I seem to have a sore throat, but I don't really know why. But there you go. Anyway, here we are. It's the show. It's episode 147. It's the 17th of November, and the weather's pretty good, I'd suggest. How about you?
Yeah, we seem to have been perpetually in an overcast without rain situation for as long as I can remember at this point. We don't get rain, we don't get sunshine, we just get overcast.
And it's just a bit damp when you get up in the morning.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, really, isn't it? It's no extremes of weather, which is okay, but I suspect this is probably global warming related as well. Anyway, grey in Swansea, which is what people expect.
If you define Swansea, what colour would make you think of Swansea? Grey. I love Swansea, and I'm gutted I'm not there because you're by the sea.
We are by the sea, and it's a very nice part of the world, and I'm very happy to live here. Anyway, shall we crack on and do a bit of a show now we've settled into our new morning recording slot on a Sunday, it would seem?
Yeah, let's do it. Well, it's good for me because it's before taking kids to football, so this works well. Let's get on with the follow-up then.
So, first story in follow-up is that apparently Apple snuck in a little thing into the upgrades of the MacBook Pros, which we weren't expecting.
Yeah, so I saw this in the week, and I read it, and I don't know what it means. I think that's what I'm going to say. What does quantum dot display mean for me? Like, we know the screen's been getting better. They've been getting brighter and brighter. But I didn't really know what if I had one of these, wouldn't actually notice, if that makes sense. Because I did look at a MacBook the other day in a store here in the UK, and it looked nice. But because I didn't have the other one with me, like the old MacBook Pro, I didn't know what the difference was.
So fundamentally, it boils down to better colours. So you get a better color gamut, and you get better motion performance. So the 120 frames per second, I think they are, for the built-in MacBook Pro displays, you'll get slightly better motion performance. So significantly faster when doing tests side by side. So basically, it's just a better screen. Some of the higher-end Samsung TVs have had quantum dot for a while for this very reason: better motion, better color. If you're a video or a photography professional, then this is exactly what you want in your screens, I think, for them all to always get better like this. So, good, solid upgrade, well done, snuck it in. Surprised they didn't talk about it.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Why did they make a fanfare about this? I just find that really bizarre.
Yeah, it is really bizarre. But, we'll take a free upgrade, I guess. It's another reason for you to enjoy your MacBook Pro as much as you possibly can.
Or to justify the expense in your head.
Absolutely. Should we do the next story?
Let's do it.
Which unfortunately I can't show in the web browser because it's opened up in my Mastodon client, but never mind, I'll read it out. So this is from Paul Haddad at Tapbots, who wrote the Mastodon client that I'm reading it out of. If you do buy a smaller capacity M4 Mac or a Mac Mini or something like that, only with the 256GB option, is that apparently there's a new option in settings where you can tick a box and say download and install large apps to a separate disk. And you can choose the disk and you can just crack on from there. I think that's a great quality of life upgrade.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? And I think they brought this in the latest OS. But surely it's Apple going, we know we're not shipping with enough space in our devices, so we're making your life a bit easier. So it does make some sense. I just wish Apple did better story. I think they should start with 512, and I think they need to review their pricing because it gets scary quickly.
It gets very scary quickly, particularly when you go out and you look at the cost of, say, a 2TB faster SSD than Apple actually ship. It's like 94 quid these days, and you can get a 4TB one for 150 odd, and I think it's at least a $400 upgrade to go up to the next storage tier.
Yeah, it's absolutely bonkers. And I find it a little bit frustrating, I must confess. Like, why do you do it, Apple? And also, it's hard to recommend a Mac Mini for somebody to just go and buy off the shelf because the storage tiers are so low. Like, I want to recommend this one. I think you have to go up to the $800 one to get the 512, which is a big step for the one that you want to recommend when people see it as $600.
I think it's more justifiable in the Mac Mini with this option, which I figured out a way to do for the viewers. You can actually see it in the web browser now. With this option, larger apps, Final Cut Pro, photos, things like that, this makes it possible for a fixed computer. I see the problem for a non-fixed computer, more for a MacBook Pro or something like that. But if your Mac Mini or your Mac Studio or whatever else is going to be, or you're just going to have a permanently fixed in place MacBook Pro, I think this fixes the problem.
Yeah, and you can always buy duct tape.
As in the later post from Paul, where he went with the storage setup and he plugs in a 4TB SSD via Thunderbolt drive to his Mac Mini, and the Thunderbolt drive is almost as big as the Mac Mini, which is just shows the scale of these things, really. But I think this is a good solution.
Yeah, and on ATP they were discussing the speeds of Thunderbolt as well, because somebody had asked, is the internal storage, is it going to be as quick if I buy an external one? And basically Thunderbolt 4 and 5 is so good, you probably don't need to worry about it, unless you were doing something really professional where you needed the fastest SSD possible and storage. You wouldn't notice whether you're using Thunderbolt 4 or 5. You just need to get a good enclosure that supports those speeds.
So I think Thunderbolt 4 is 40 gigabits per second, and Thunderbolt 5 is 120, something like that. It's an order of magnitude faster, Thunderbolt 5. And if you're trying to do live video editing, like scrubbing a timeline or something like that, then you're going to want that even faster. I think 40 is good enough. Absolutely, it's good enough. But if you're running, say, 8K, 120 frames per second, super professional video, you want that faster transfer speed.
Agreed, but I think most use cases probably wouldn't even notice. Like me, for example, I probably wouldn't notice.
No, and if you buy a base model Mac Mini anyway, you're only getting Thunderbolt 4. So it's only those with a Pro chip that are getting Thunderbolt 5. I've got a Pro chip in mine. So should I choose to, I could go for Thunderbolt 5. But there's not a lot of Thunderbolt 5 peripherals around just yet.
No, but that will come though, won't it? I think over time, as Thunderbolt 5 becomes more prevalent, it will come. And I think you've got a really good device that's very good for future-proofing you.
Yep, I think so too. Something that's a little less future-proof about the M4 Max, however, is that it's been discovered by Howard Oakley, I think, that you can't virtualize earlier versions of Mac OS on that. And that's a bit weird.
Yes and no, because didn't Apple announce in the latest version of macOS that you can now virtualize it for this version going forwards? So don't we need the next one to come out before you can, install the next 16, macOS 16, and then you'll be able to virtualize 15 onto it? Isn't that right? Or am I reading that all wrong?
It doesn't matter. Point of a virtualization is you can virtualize older hardware. If I install Octodesktop, or you installed Fusion, VMware Fusion Pro or something like that, you were able to virtualize older versions of the operating system, right? If you wanted to install even an Intel version of it, it would run it very slowly, but it would allow you to do it. Now they're saying that you can't do that.
Yeah, that is odd. Sorry, you're correct. That is odd, isn't it?
It's very odd. The point, if you're a developer that's maintaining, I don't know, macOS 13 or 14 or something like that for a version of your app, you potentially can't upgrade to the latest version of Macs in order to virtualize them. You might need to stick with what you got.
Yeah, that does seem backwards for a chip that's been so universally praised.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a minor thing. How many people do want to go back and virtualize it? All they want to do is run their programs, and the programs are probably going to run mostly. But I just think I found this a really weird sort of a bit of a non sequitur when I was looking at it. Worked fine M1, M2, M3, and then all of a sudden M4 you can't do that beyond a certain level? Odd.
Yeah, and what does this mean though if you're a developer, you buy the new M4 Studio next year when it comes out? What are you going to do about testing your apps? It seems a backward step, because it did feel like Apple was improving that situation.
This was my point. I think it's really odd.
And there's another shoe to drop, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, major setback. All the comments in this post are quite right about it being a major setback. Maybe, I don't know what virtualization programs they've tried here. I don't know if it's all of them. It could be a chipset limitation. Maybe they've ditched some part of the virtualization code for the cores in the M4 Mac. But I think this is something worth keeping an eye on.
Yep, no, agreed.
Fair enough. Do you want to tell us about M4 Mini FOMO?
Yeah, I thought this was quite good. As somebody that's got a bit of FOMO, people are 3D printing what looks like an M4 Mini and putting it on their desk, which I think is kind of cool. I just think it's a beautiful object to look at, and so people are 3D printing it, and I just think this looks ace, and I would love something like that on my desk, because I just think it's quite a nice, it looks a bit like a fidget toy in a way. I just think it's kind of cool, and as you were showing, it's even like a box, so it's quite a cool thing, I think. And I have a 13-year-old son who really wants a 3D printer for Christmas, and I'm thinking, man, if we get one of these, I could do some stuff with it. I just think this is really cool, and you're showing the photos now of like all the different use cases for it. I think that's kind of neat. I just think it's really cool, and I kind of want one.
It's not going to solve your FOMO, though, is it?
No, but I could just fiddle with it when I'm on calls and have it as a pen storage, as you've just demonstrated. So I just think it's kind of a cool idea, and I quite like it, because I think the object it's a beautiful object that Apple have made.
Well, I think it's form after function, isn't it? That you can just go and find one of these things. And I've just, as we're talking about this, have fired up the Printables website to see what molds are out there for 3D printers. And yeah, it does look like there's quite a lot of them. This is a whole rat hole I really don't want to go down.
Yeah, agreed. But I just thought it was quite cool. Like I say, if you can't justify it, but you want to have a look at the size of it and appreciate maybe how big it is next to your other device that you currently own, it's quite a good way of just seeing what it looks like before you buy it.
I think it's worth another show talking about 3D printers and the value of 3D printers. What you've just illustrated is one potential use for 3D printed objects. This kind of thing I often think about, I wish I had a 3D printer for, where you can people have already produced blueprints, for want of a better word, for 3D printers, for VESA mounts and all this kind of under desk mounting, all this stuff for new devices like the day after they drop. And when things like this appear, I suddenly see the point of 3D printers. But like I say, probably for another day.
Yep, no, agreed. And like I say, I'm doing lots of research because my son put one on his Christmas list.
Fair enough. Should we talk about standing desks?
Seems relevant as I'm currently standing up whilst I talk to you.
Yeah. This is in follow-up on Not News, because I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, about basically we're not sure if standing desks are any good for you or not. That although there are some benefits to standing up, they come with other problems related to varicose veins and all sorts of things like that. And I think it's kind of a wash. They're no worse for you than sitting, but sitting's no better for you than being at a standing desk. So I think the only answer of all this is, if it makes you feel better and you feel more productive, awesome. But you still need to get out and exercise, and that's the answer.
Surely the right answer here is you need to do a little bit of both. It's not good for you to stand all day and be fatigued. It's not good for you to sit all day and be lazy. Therefore, a bit column A, a bit column B, and then go out and get some exercise.
I think it's walk away from your desk every so often and do something else. You know, even if it's a 10-minute whip around the park or something else. Yeah. Standing isn't going to fix all the problems associated with you being at a desk all day. That's the fundamental for this. Get a good chair. If you feel better standing, crack on. But it's kind of a wash.
Yeah, okay. That's fair enough. I don't think we're too far away from each other on this.
No, probably not. And I've got a standing desk too. I just sit at it most of the time.
It is super convenient though when you want to recable and stuff. You can just crank it up and get under there.
Or you just get a lovely monitor like I have that spins in 360 degrees and you can recable and no problem.
Yeah, that's cool.
We touched on this last week as well, AirPlay mirroring improving on the Mac. This is quite a big deal in the sense of now you're able to select more things. Once upon a time when you did AirPlay mirroring, you just shared your screen, but now it's more granular, and in the same way we're doing now with FaceTime when we talk to each other, and for the viewers of the podcast, you can just share a window. Well, AirPlay has the same features now. Don't need to go into it in lots of detail. I just think it's about time really that they've added to this.
Yeah, I think it's good, and to be fair to them, I think they are slowly chipping away at macOS and bringing, whether you love it or hate it, some of the things from other devices and modernising it. I think they're doing quite a good job of it.
I had a horrendous time. Last night when I realised something odd on my Mac. I don't know about you. You don't use a Mac a lot. You're more of an iPad person, I know. But the way I function with a Mac is when I'm done with the active window, so Safari at the moment, for example, is active, I'll click on the desktop to activate Finder to do something else, copy files around, connect to a file server, all that kind of stuff. When I was clicking on the desktop to deactivate the active application, it wasn't activating Finder. I had to physically go and click on the Finder icon in the dock to make it happen, and it was driving me mental.
Yeah, I can imagine you getting frustrated with that.
I just couldn't understand it. Anyway, it's a setting in the same way that Sequoia, it might even have been before, but it might even have been in Sonoma. When you clicked on the background, all the windows would go into expose mode. There's a checkbox there that say make Finder active as well, which I hadn't checked.
Oh, okay.
How stupid is it? So they might be chipping away at doing better things with AirPlay, but frankly, they're annoying the hell out of sort of quite experienced Mac users by leaving stuff like that in.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Yeah. I guess they've only got so much resource and not much money. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's not a true statement. Do you want to tell us about something better with Apple Music Classical?
Yeah, so I was quite happy to see this actually, and I have tried it out driving home the other day. So finally, Apple Music Classical has come or been updated on the iPhone with CarPlay support, which is really interesting because they announced this, I think it was over a year ago, and then they pulled it quickly because it didn't work, and it bombed as soon as you opened the app. So they pulled CarPlay, and I thought, oh, well, this will be back shortly, and here we are 12 months later, and here it is again, after they've done a version 2 revision. Classical Apple Music Classical just seems to be moving very glacially. I don't understand it. It's on the iPad, but it's not on the Mac. And I wonder if it's not on the Mac because of iTunes and some legacy there. But it's in CarPlay now, which is great, and it's basically what you'd expect. And I think this is really good because I do occasionally like a little bit of classical music. I'm no expert in any of it, but just trying to explore some different things. So it's great they're doing it in CarPlay. Tick. It's taken too long. The app is basically Apple Music, but just with a classical filter on it. I think that's all they're doing. I don't think they're doing anything that clever. But no, it's really good. And it does feel like feels like classical app is getting more love than the Apple Music app at the moment, which is strange.
You and I both had a rant in the week about how bad Apple Music is.
They're just not doing anything with it, which blows my mind a little bit. Unless there's a shoe to drop, as I keep saying, but I just don't get it. There was nothing major in iOS 18. They've not announced anything. Classical's got PDF booklets in it now, so you can look at the album notes. That'd be great to have. Why wouldn't they do that for albums in Apple Music? I don't know. It just feels to be moving so slowly. I can't explain it. But win for Classical.
It's clearly like some sort of very slow building sonata is what they're doing. That's the tempo they're working on. It's not a fast-paced rock and roll thing.
Agreed. But given Apple Music, they make a lot of noise about it. They're making a play, obviously, to beat Spotify. Part of me was thinking I should go and try Spotify, and I haven't wanted to do that in a long time, but I don't know.
Yeah, I happen to have a rolled-in YouTube Music subscription because I'm a Google Premiere something or other, and YouTube Music's really slick. It works really well in the browser. It's dead easy to create playlists. The suggestion of what to listen to next is better, and Spotify's even better again. So yeah, I think that should maybe be your mission at some point, is to spend a month with Spotify and just see how you get on with it.
Yeah, the problem I have is my whole family uses Apple Music, and will have no inclination to move.
Yeah, but what difference does that make to you? You can still try it.
Yeah, true. That's fair.
It's not affecting anyone else. It's the perfect situation. It's only affecting you.
Yeah, fair. I was just more thinking of my family subscription. But no, you're right. I should probably go and try it out.
Yep. Something else somebody should maybe stop trying out is Marquez getting himself in trouble. I don't know if you saw this story in the week.
No, I've not seen it. Actually, go and talk me through it.
So what happened, and I subscribe to Marquez on YouTube, and I get notifications when new videos drop. And the new video dropped, and what he was doing was talking about a new DJI action camera. So this is, DJI mostly make drones, but they make cameras and things as well. They make a competitor to GoPro's action cams called the Osmo something or other 3D. It's a relatively cheap, good quality camera that Marquez started reviewing. But as a consequence of doing the review, he filmed himself in, I think it was a Lamborghini, but he filmed himself doing something in the region of 95 miles per hour in a 30 zone near a school on this camera and didn't cut it out of his video. That's not a great look for a YouTuber particularly.
No, not at all. And it does feel like he's not reading the room at the moment a little bit. Do you know what I mean? He's had a couple of missteps this year, which for somebody that barely ever has a misstep is odd. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, he's only human at the end of the day, but I don't understand. He doesn't need to do this kind of advertising. If you ever watch any of his car videos, he uses an iPhone, he holds it in his hand, he just walks around, and he does a reasonable job of it. And I understand maybe his desire to upgrade his video settings to do that, but it was a 10-minute ad, the thing, and I got bored, actually. I only watched about 3 minutes. I didn't get as far as him doing the speeding car part, because I was bored. It was an advert. But, and it's probably worth reading up on a little bit, but afterwards, he cut out the unnecessary driving clip. Yeah, because he was basically filming himself. I don't know if it's a felony in America. I don't know how it works. But he was speeding. He was breaking the law as part of this video. So this year we've got the Panels app being a disaster. We've got this being a problem. We've got his... it says at the bottom of this article, actually, he works on physical products like Atom's shoes, and he's joined the board at wallet maker Ridge, and he's definitely sort of trying to diversify himself. I don't know. I guess it makes sense if you're so beholden to Google for what you do that you might want to be able to spread out and have other avenues to explore. But Marquez, you're better than this. Come on.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I think he is better than this, and I worry that he's devaluing his brand a little bit by diversifying. He spread himself a lot thinner, and he's cheapened himself a little bit, sadly. But you're right, he is only human, and I think that's why he's done so well, because on his videos he comes across as a very human, interesting person. He's got a good character. Do you know what I mean? And I really like him for that. I think the way he generally presents himself is really good. But he's just had a couple of missteps, and hopefully this year it will be a bit humbling for him, I think, and hopefully he realise, actually, I maybe don't need to just chase every dollar. Surely he doesn't need the dollars.
I couldn't believe he did. I mean, the irony about it was they obviously realized he was speeding, and they tried to blur it out. The original video he's blurred out, but the car he was driving, this fancy Lamborghini or whatever it was, has a mirrored display on the passenger side of the Speedo, and they didn't blur it out on that side.
Maybe they rushed it. It just stupid home goal.
Why was he driving so fast in a school zone? It doesn't matter if they rushed it or not. He shouldn't have been speeding in a 30 zone.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just a stupid, dumb look, isn't it?
It is. Should we do some news and talk about another stupid, dumb look?
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm loving my segues today. So, this is a UK-based story for once. So, you said it before at the start of the podcast, you use Which for things, but which is a consumer champion in the UK, they're sort of really fight for consumer rights and all the rest of it. You have to pay quite a lot of money to be part of the Which branding in order to be part of this, but they've hit Apple with a £3 billion claim for ripping off 40 million UK iCloud users. And the crux of this story is that they've artificially limited what's accessible on the phones with the 5 gigabyte limit to enforce people spending up to the next level to be able to back up their photos and give them anxiety by putting up pop-ups and all that stuff effectively, and that's quite hard to argue with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you and I have said it before. Apple in storage is a theme. Maybe that's our title for today. It's still 5 gig. It was 5 gig when it launched back in, I don't even know when at this point iCloud came out, but it was, say, 2011. So it's a good decade old, and 5 gig was reasonable at the time. I think it was a fair stab, but obviously the world's moved on. Photos have got bigger. It does seem stupid. I guess Apple could argue we don't need to give anything away for free. If you don't have to have online services. But how many people do you see that don't want to give Apple a couple of quid to back up their device? It's a lot, but I can also understand the frustrations as well.
Right. That's fair that Apple don't need to give anything away for free, but in which case they should have an option in the app that you click and it backs up to some other service of your choice then. Your own service, a Google service, Dropbox, doesn't matter. They don't give you that option. They just say expand your iCloud storage.
Yeah, that is fair. And I do wonder whether Apple will have to address this as they're having to address other things of, do they need to allow ways of doing this or make it easier to back up at home and things like that.
Anyway, I think they're going to struggle a little bit with fighting this case. You're right, they don't need to do any of this stuff, but as the EU would say, there are other options, aren't there?
Yeah, there are other options, Apple, and you should try a lot harder.
Yeah, and as pointed out in the Verge article, they're not the only ones. If you've ever installed a Windows 11 PC, the amount of nagging you get for OneDrive from doing it is frankly off the charts.
Yeah, I would concur with that. When I set up a gaming PC here, I was just like, Microsoft, I just want to get to the start. Where do I get to the main screen? There's a lot of screens to go through, and they are quite persuasive.
I don't want a Microsoft 365 account. I don't want a OneDrive account. Why am I failing the security settings? Because I haven't picked this folder to back up. It's a really, really scummy way of going about things.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. Apple and Microsoft are not great both of them aren't great in this.
That's an understatement, I think. Should we talk about Elon Musk?
Let's do it. What's Elon done now?
Well, he's targeting Microsoft via OpenAI. So we've talked about this before. Elon, I think, was an initial investor in OpenAI. They went off in a direction he wasn't happy with. He said he was going to sue them. But basically, he has this fraud, breach of contract and racketeering lawsuit against OpenAI, and now he's expanded it to include Microsoft. So this is fine if he feels aggrieved, and Elon often feels aggrieved about stuff like that. He's a very litigious character, actually. He always wins, so I'm not surprised that he is a very litigious character. The problem I have with this is he's about to be in a position of power with the United States government.
Yeah, I would concur with that statement. I think it's an interesting case he's bringing. Obviously, he used to be on the board of OpenAI, and he helped get it going, and then he wanted it to be not for profit, which is strange for the richest man in the world, wanting to do the right thing, apparently. And he's obviously got XAI, which is what he's trying to have as a competitor. Obviously, Microsoft massively linked to OpenAI. They invest. They've got a guy. I think they were going to have somebody on the board, but maybe that's stopped now. And Microsoft Office products all built on OpenAI. I wonder though if they're going to combat this though by coming back and going, well, now we're partnering with Apple and we're partnering. They've broadened their partnerships. It'll be interesting to see how this one gets. How this one goes through the process, but you can see why Elon's doing it, because Microsoft have got the march on competitors by shipping very quickly Copilot and hooking up with OpenAI from the outset, and they keep iterating on it. They're kind of like Apple. I think they can only focus on one area, and it's all about Copilot and AI.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this ruling or this. It's not a judgment. What is it? This suit: breach of contract, breach of implied fact, breach of covenant, breach of quasi contract, tortious interference, constructive fraud. And here's the important one that we've talked about in this a few times now: violation of the Sherman Act. So that's the antitrust part of this that Apple are facing and Google are facing. And again, he's about to be an agent of the United States government. This has got to be concerning for OpenAI.
I completely concur with you. This is, it's got to be concerning, and he's going to have a lot more power than he should have.
Another agency that's probably slightly worried is Meta. The EU has fined Meta for an €800 million law for breaking. This is in Facebook Marketplace at this point, and I guess without going into the details of this is just the dominant position that Facebook Marketplace has within the selling of things within the EU. The people turn there. How open that is to taxation, how open that is to consumer responses, and all the various other bits and pieces that would come along with maintenance of something like this that an eBay or someone like that would have to have in place.
Yeah, I would concur with that statement. I think I'm not a Facebook person, as you know, but I see a lot of people buying and selling on Facebook. And Vinted here in the UK seems to have quite a life more recently, which is more for selling clothes and things. I'm not surprised by this, but I don't know. I don't know how Facebook stand on this, because they've got a statement here going, we built the marketplace in response to consumer demand. How is it their fault that lots of people use it, unless they are building a walled garden, I guess? But do you know what I mean? If they made something and people use it.
Facebook is a walled garden. Yeah. Apple's a walled garden. I think let's just accept the walled garden thing. I was looking to get a menu for a restaurant yesterday here in Swansea, and the only place I could get the menu was on Facebook. So I'm not going to go to the restaurant, even though it's a highly rated place.
I hate that.
It drives me crazy. The more interesting sort of end of this, I'm not surprised Facebook's being fined by the EU. Meta's being fined by the EU. Let's face it, we've done a lot of that in this podcast. But this is coming to the end of Margrethe Vestager's tenure as being in charge of this part of the EU sort of litigation arm, fining arm. And the thinking at the moment is that potentially more conciliatory position will be struck by the EU to US companies in light of recent political events. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens soon.
Yeah. How far is Trump's reach going to stretch, I guess, is the question.
I think he'll just lie in his own pocket, because that's what he does. But, I guess we'll see.
Agreed.
It is interesting. It's a lot of money, and Meta's appealing. So we'll have to see what happens with that. Should we talk about a cool use of AI?
A cool use of AI. Sounds good.
This is occasionally it's nice to find them, that there are positive LLM stories. I actually heard about this on the radio. I happened to be passing a radio on Tuesday or Wednesday, and it was on the Jeremy Vine show on BBC Two. And O2 have deployed a voice-based large language model that it will play to scammers, that will pretend to be a grandmother, and it can do this at scale. It can have 700, 800, 900, 10,000 calls going at the same time to that call center that wants you to install an agent on your computer in order to, and it sounds like a granny. And Jeremy Vine, the host, had a conversation with the granny about this. Yeah, with the AI, giving an example of how good it sounded. And it does sound like a slightly elderly 70-plus-year-old lady going, I type 19.2. And would really sort of stretch the scammer's time out to do that. It was really quite clever, and in the article here, which is linked from the My London News, up to 40 minutes at a time it's capturing these scammers going, which is great. It's playing them at their own game.
Yeah, I kind of like it. I'm amazed though O2 have invested so heavily in it, but that's kind of cool.
It probably not that much of an investment. At the same time, what will happen is that the scammers will have their own LLMs, and it'll just be LLMs talking to LLMs at some point.
Just wasting each other's compute resource, I guess.
And killing the planet.
Interesting side note this week, though. I went to buy some Bitcoin on a platform here in the UK. Not a lot, by the way, just a very small amount of money, just like a fractional share. And I thought I'd just try it out. Just a few £100, like literally nothing. But so I went to make the transaction. And then this is declined by your bank. And like I say, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was an unusual transaction for me because I've never used Coinbase is what I used. I'm not endorsing Coinbase in any way. It's just I just wanted to try it out. And so I went on to do that, and it got declined by the bank. And then the next day, I had a letter from the bank saying, please, can you call us? Which seemed an odd way for them to get in contact with me, a post letter through my letterbox, even though I've set my account to be paper free. So I phoned them up, and I spoke to the person. They said, "Oh, I can't deal with this transaction. You need to go to our other department." So I go to the other department, and they basically talked me through. Was this you? I was like, "Yes, it's me." Have you been coerced into making this transaction? I was like, "No, I haven't." Have you been asked to install TeamViewer on any of your devices or any other software? And obviously, this is a scam that's happening. But people are being coerced into buying Bitcoin or investing with people installing software and monitoring what you're doing. And my bank contacted me, and I had to go through, and I said, "I actually work in IT, I understand what TeamViewer is. I haven't been asked to install it. This was a transaction I was making off my own back for them to update my card and let me then go make the transaction."
Wow.
Which I've never been through before.
No, that's. I mean, I've had this is an unusual transaction, phone the bank things urgently, but I've never had well, I wouldn't buy Bitcoin. But, that's an interesting experience.
I just wanted to dab. I feel like I just wanted to have a go.
Okay.
Like I said, it wasn't a lot. Like, I can't afford a whole Bitcoin, which is £60,000 or £70,000.
Yeah. Cryptocurrency, yeah. Okay. Interesting. Fine. Good.
There you go.
That is well done by your bank, though. It's obviously a big problem.
Yeah, but like I said, I was just amazed that they were. I don't know. I've just never seen that level of detail they've gone into, other than just asking you, "Was this you?" Whereas obviously it's flagged on their system. Oh, if somebody mentions they're buying some cryptocurrency, they need to go to this other department that are trained to ask the right questions.
Interesting. Okay, another thing that's interesting, and back to our legislative bent for this episode. Apple has received an EU warning to end discriminatory geo-blocking practice. So this is inside of EU nations, i.e. if you buy something in Germany, why is that different to what you buy in France, effectively? Because it's all one block. Why should a book be priced differently, or a movie show, a movie or a TV show, or something like that? So this is interesting, I think, and this is absolutely within the EU's remit, is there should be fair pricing across the block.
I don't know how I feel about this. They're different markets. They might have different tax policies. But other than that, I guess they trade in largely the same currency, so it kind of makes sense. I don't know. Does it cost them more to sell a book in Germany than it does in France? Or are they just doing localized market competition?
Well, that's it. I mean, for a long time, the iPod was a marker of how expensive something was across the world, wasn't it? You'd look in Brazil, and an iPod would be this, and you'd look in the UK, it would be that, and you'd get a feel for how their economies were going, really. The EU's not, I mean, I suppose bits of the EU are like that. There are quite different, economic headwinds in Greece compared to, Berlin, whatever district of Germany. But that's not, the EU is a single trading bloc. If you come to the EU, then you should present one price to all nations as a partner. You shouldn't really have this sort of discriminatory. Germany is different to France, is different to Lithuania. That's not the way the EU is meant to work. That's the point of them negotiating the deals the way that they do. That's the positive side of this. The negative side of this is that all the discussions we've had about films and music and all that kind of stuff are different from country to country, because the various music industry bodies, the various film age rating bodies are different from nation to nation. So I could see Apple's argument on this as well about that.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because, like you say, in one breath, you're meant to see the EU as one territory, but it's not one territory. It's lots of territories that haven't fully morphed into one, if you know what I mean. And I think it's good that they've got their own identities within the EU collective. I'll probably go with, or union. But yeah, it's an odd one. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this one. I mean, obviously, if Apple is doing some naughtiness and artificially inflating prices, then that needs to be dealt with. But in the other breath, you can see why they would treat them separately, even if there's no, artificialness about this. But there are real reasons why they've treated them differently.
It feels like they're ignoring it, though. So this is a post from Nilian, who is one of the podcasters on the, I forget the name of the podcast, actually, but one of MacBreak Weeklies.
And she's on Mac Stories.
Mac Stories, that's the place I'm looking for, Mac Stories. They were meant to have done this in 2018.
Oh, wow.
So they've just dragged their heels really badly on it. So I'm not surprised that you are getting a bit cheesed off with them.
Yeah, I can understand that.
So, again, an interesting story about the single market and all the rest of it, and we always look quite jealously at the single market, but I guess it is a bit of a constitutional and legal minefield for a company like Apple to walk, but then they drag the heels on everything, so...
Yeah, this is true, but it's going to be interesting to see what Apple's retort is on this.
It will be. Something else that's of interest, this is probably more to me than many. But 2 papers were pulled this week because the authors of the papers were using unlicensed software as part of their analysis. So that's bad. Well done to the journals for pulling them. They were using a geography mapping-based software for this, and they hadn't licensed it, and that came to light. So the journals pulled it. There is part of academic licensing that says all your stuff must be paid for if there's a subscription to a journal, software you're using, all that kind of stuff. You've morally, ethically got to have done the right thing in order to do that, to have that publication. So fair enough. It is quite interesting. Academic publishing is a whole thing at the moment about should you be charged to publish things within journals. Reviewers aren't paid to do that. So ethically, journals are in a bit of an odd place at the moment as well around the way they treat reviewers, the way things go in there, differing pricing across regions, what pharmaceuticals pay to get things published versus what academics do, why some academics don't need to pay at all. So it feels like a bit of a double standard. The science isn't changed by the fact it wasn't licensed. But I just think it's quite interesting when these things come to light, that our IT world hits sort of the academic world.
No, I kind of agree with it. I think if you are using something, it's like at work. Some software we could use, you can have for free, but there you go. If you're using it commercially, you need to pay for a license, and we do. And so I would concur with this, that if you're using it for your paper and your research, then you're getting gain out of it, and therefore you should pay for it. I'm a big believer you should pay for these things.
I don't disagree. I 100% do agree that if you're using it ethically and morally, it's the right thing to do. I think the point is it's just a bit of a double standard from the journals sometimes when they charge people to read these things, but science is meant to be free. You know what I mean? And if the authors have done their right thing with all the software right, and they've put it in hopefully an open access journal, well, that might not be the case. You know what I mean? It's a bit weird all round, this sort of publishing thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I try and use open source software, so it's R and Python and things like that my team make use of. So there are no licenses attached to that. But yeah, I think of course, you should always pay for software.
Yeah, I completely agree. I often try and go for lifetime, actually, when I can, because I'm not a big fan of monthly subscriptions. I don't mind annual, but I don't want something coming out every month because I think it's just annoying. So if it's reasonable, I like the lifetime one if I can do it.
Apart from Apple and Netflix and Amazon and shall
Amazon's
we talk?
Quite good though, because you pay for Prime in a Warner. Quite like that.
Amazon's quite good. I don't know that Amazon are quite good. But.
Sorry, maybe I've worded that wrong. I like the way I could just pay for it in one go. I do the same with Disney Plus. Yeah, that works for me. But I just rather do that. I'm happy to have the service, and I like it when they do. If you pay annually, you get a discount.
Should we talk about should we talk about a different bank?
A different bank. We're going to move on to NatWest, big bank here in the UK.
So, big bank here in the UK. Yeah, this is quite interesting, and I'm a bit surprised the bank has been so lax with this, really. They've only just banned other messaging apps from being used corporately within the bank. So this is, I think a lot of agencies and companies do this where they know that chats can be deleted after 2 weeks, so there is no record of it. So it doesn't go in the email, it doesn't go in your Teams chat, it doesn't go in your Slack chat. Those things that are sort of part of your record of trading. Yep. But they've only just got around to banning Telegram, Signal, Viber, WhatsApp Messenger, and Skype. Ooh.
So this came up at work, actually, because I am in complete agreement with you. I would have thought NatWest would have done it earlier. They're very stringent. They've got lots of things they have to do here in the UK to meet the financial conduct regulation. But I see this in a lot of organisations. There's those systems that are, endorsed, such as Teams or whatever it may be, whatever the corporate messaging is, and then you find half the businesses functioning on systems that aren't corporately blessed, and I don't think that's right. The reason they want to do things offline, as it were, is because then they come up when they get searched and SARS and there's no record, and you can ask both entities to delete it. But obviously, if you delete your WhatsApp chat, and maybe you and I had a WhatsApp chat going, for example, and we were trading secrets, we're not, by the way, you could delete yours, but you've got no record I've deleted mine. And that is a problem. And obviously, this came to light, especially around the pandemic here in the UK, where Boris, his iPhone, I don't know what happened, I lost my WhatsApp history and I haven't got all the evidence that you want to see. Because you can bury data and it seems that's allowed. So I'm not surprised NatWest have done it. I'm surprised how long it's taken them to do it.
I agree. It is a bit shady. And NatWest aren't saying personal communications isn't allowed, but they're certainly not endorsed by the company, is the impression I get from this. But yeah, interesting.
Which is right, and I think we do have a big blur now. It's even more so we're working from home, where people blur their personal and their work life a lot more than what they should. And we're going to talk about what apps you should install on devices later, but I'm a big fan. You should work is separate to home life.
I agree. Now I have a separate work Mac, separate home Mac as well. So there we go. Do you want to tell us about Thunderbolt 5?
Thunderbolt 5 is really fast, and everybody should get it. How's that?
That was pretty simple. Yeah.
So we talked about it earlier. It does 120 gigabits per second up and down, and it's really fast. And we talked earlier as well, there's not a lot of devices out there for it, but OWC, really good maker of fine Mac accessories and docks and things, have come out with a Thunderbolt 5 dock. It's got 3 ports on the back, 1 on the front, all Thunderbolt 5, and obviously you've got one to plug into your PC there. This looks a great dock, don't you think?
Yeah, I am quite interested in this, and the price is actually not awful as well. I was expecting the price to be... If you look at the price of Thunderbolt 4 docks, some of them are £200, £300, £400, whereas this sort of very first one that we've seen at $189 is actually a very good price.
I think it's a really good price, really good price, and it's come from a reputable brand, especially if you're in their Mac ecosystem. So just to go back through the ports, it's got one obviously to plug into your Mac, and it's got 2 on the back for Thunderbolt 5s and 1 on the front for Thunderbolt 5, and it's also got a USB-A port on it, which I'm a little sad to see because I want that standard to go. And obviously you need to plug it into power. It doesn't power over the Thunderbolt bus, which makes sense.
I've come to terms with the fact that USB-A is never going away. There's too many things in the ecosystem out there that will always just be USB-A. And as I look at my new monitor with 4 USB-A ports on the back of it, it's not going anywhere, Chris. We just got to deal with it. You can move to as much USB-C as you want, but this is great. I think it's a great device. I think it's a good price. I like the fact it supports 8K. I like all the bandwidth on it. It's terrific. It's the confusion for me is the USB-C hole. Is it Thunderbolt 5? Is it Thunderbolt 4? Is it only a 5 gigabit USB-C that's on the front of a device? Your average consumer doesn't know this. And I think this perpetuates the fact that there is no clear and obvious marking between the cables and the devices as to what they take. And I think that's the next place device manufacturers have to go. The one I'm plugging my iPhone with at the moment now will not send a signal to my screen. You know what I mean? And what cable I've got in my drawer when I go to plug in these things. Do I need to buy all new cables? I noticed Apple were selling a Thunderbolt 5 cable at $80 or something, I think it was, for a cable. So the fact that this is $189 is great, but I really, really strongly feel they need to sort out the rest of the ecosystem.
I completely agree with you here. I think they've got the numbering right. It's nice and easy. I've got Thunderbolt 4, 3, 5. But just do something on the end of the cables and the ports. Like USB-A port is a blue port, and that means it's the fast port. Just give us different colours for each different variant of Thunderbolt, and it's a tip on it. It doesn't have to be seen once it's plugged in, so it can still look neat. But the end of each cable should have something on it, and the port that you're plugging into, and you then know if you've got purple to purple, yeah, it's all Thunderbolt 5. It's going to be great, and if it's blue to purple, oh, I've got the wrong mismatch cable.
Yeah, there's some quite clever cables out there that show you the speed of the device you're connected to, but obviously they were more expensive again because they have that. So, but yeah, I agree with you. Some sort of standard to do this in the same way USB 2 had blue interiors within it, so you knew it was a 5 gigabit one rather than the black connectors that came before it. It wouldn't be that hard to do.
I completely agree, and it is frustrating because I plugged my Mac into charger then it says, oh, this isn't charging fast enough, and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, there's a massive power brick on it, and it's like, oh, I probably need a different cable. Which cable do I need? How do I know I'm buying the best cable? I don't know.
A problem. I think that's the end of the news. Should we do some media?
Let's do it.
First story, a show I like very much but have neglected to come back and keep watching. Mythic Quest is about to drop a new season. Season 4 is due in January. I don't know, were you a Mythic Quest watcher?
You're going to shout at me. I've never seen it.
I think that's very sad, Chris. It's a very well done show about, it's a computer game particularly, but it's more about general IT stuff and the personalities involved with running any sort of big computer-focused operation, really. Anyway, fourth season's about to drop. It's getting a spin-off about other people on it, which is going to be an anthology. And actually, the most interesting episodes of Mythic Quest up till now have been the sort of historical anthology-based ones within the main run of the show. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's great. It's got Rob McElhenney is the guy who's sort of the creative person responsible for it. Obviously, we know him best now for being part of Ryan Reynolds and Wrexham Football Club. But previous to that, also wrote It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Funny guy, good actor. I'm excited to get more Mythic Quest. I'm excited to get more spin-offs as well.
Yeah, I feel there's a bunch of TV shows I need to put some effort into. There's Silo, there's this, there's a lot on Apple TV Plus that I've skipped and I probably need to revisit.
Yeah, Silo Season 2 dropped this week, and I need to get back and start watching it again. I thoroughly enjoyed Silo Season 1, so that's something else I'm quite keen on.
Yeah, and the problem I've got is I'll go back and watch the whole of Season 1 because I never watched it. So I'm massively behind on a lot of things at the moment.
It's not very long. There's not many episodes in it. It's definitely worth a watch, Silo.
Yeah, no, agreed. And it looks like it's right up my street. So I just need to carve out that time, I think.
Fair enough. Something you won't need to carve time out for is Freevee. Amazon are shutting it down.
As a surprise to nobody, because I don't even know why they bothered with it. What a waste of effort. Like, you've got Amazon Prime. Just do that with ads, which they've now done. I just think having the two platforms made no sense. Like, I just don't understand why you do it.
No, I don't get it either. I actually found it quite annoying. There was a show on Amazon that I absolutely loved called Bosch. It was a really highly well-produced detective show set in Los Angeles. Bosch was terrific, and to launch Freevee, they did a cut-down version, cheaper version of Bosch called Bosch Legacy, and it was dreadful. And I stopped watching it. Killed the show for me.
Yeah, it's a shame they've ruined a really good asset. I just don't understand why have two things and then you're trying to differentiate them. And everybody knows Prime is Amazon. Nobody's really heard of Freevee. It was just very bizarre.
Yep, stupid decision. Also an interesting decision. Channel 4 have announced the first UK broadcaster to have a Vision Pro app. This is cool.
This is cool, and they've launched it with a Taskmaster environment. Like, brilliant. They're leaning into a really popular property they've got. It doesn't look fantastic in the screen grab you're currently showing us. It does look a bit too artificial, but which is a shame because I think that just needs to be a bit darker and a bit, you know what I mean? It just looks not quite right, does it?
It's a bit cheesy. It's got some nods to Taskmaster with ducks and things there. I'm sure you've worn a Vision Pro. Maybe it looks better when you're actually in the Vision Pro. It's obviously the view from the Taskmaster's chair when they're in studio is what they're going for there. It's not enough to make me buy a Vision Pro, but it's pretty cool.
You mean it's not enough to make you spend £3,500?
Absolutely not.
Turns out they are cheaper on eBay, by the way. I did have a look this week, but there's still loads of money.
It's still too much money with still not enough compelling content on there.
Agreed, but I do think this is what the Vision Pro would be good for, is watching content in a siloed environment.
Fair play. Should we do a couple of games?
Yeah, I feel I'm massively behind on the games market at the moment, but you've got some good links in here.
I actually meant to pull you up. You've recommended Commandos Behind Enemy Lines twice now.
Oh, I did wonder. But I did go back and replay it again, and I just love it.
It's poor consumer advice.
No, I just really love
it. Something that might not be poor consumer advice. Apparently the Final Fantasy games are coming to Apple Arcade, so if you're an Apple Arcade subscriber, you'll be able to get the 3D remake of Final Fantasy IV, the game I played on the PlayStation many, many moons ago that came on 6 CDs.
Wow. I was just about to say, are you a big Final Fantasy person? Because I never played it. I've never got into that world. I know people love it with a passion. So where are you with it? Have you dipped in, or are you a big fan? Or
if ever a game was going to get me, it was Final Fantasy IV. I spent a lot of time, because there wasn't that many, well, there was a lot of good games on the PlayStation, but not many that you'd spend a lot of time in front of other than Gran Turismo and Wipeout, obviously. But Final Fantasy IV was really good, and it's what they call a JRPG, a Japanese role-playing game. As a particular look, it's been redone for Apple Arcade in this case. It's just such a huge game, and the concept was quite good. And if you've ever played any role-playing games, a wizard and a warrior and a thief and all that kind of stuff, and you rank them up over time, and you have continuous battles, and at the end you're strong enough to face the final thing. And that's the way most of these things work, really. Dungeon adventures are often the same sort of thing. This was done, and it had. I think the reason it was famous is you had all the lore from the Final Fantasy series, and it had all these interesting little sub games, and the graphics were quite good. They were very sort of PlayStation, nice style to them. manga-esque sort of graphics. So if anything was going to get me, it was this. But I think the fourth CD or DVD, I forget now, had a scratch on it, and I couldn't proceed, and it annoyed me so much that I'd invested so much time on it, I never went back to it. And it's been I think it's seen as the best in the series, Final Fantasy IV. So I'd say check it out if you've ever had an interest in these kinds of things, but it's kind of left me behind.
Yeah, and I wonder how much people are actually going to want to play this all these years later, and it's on Apple Arcade, which doesn't seem to have garnered much traction.
No, I got to say, the bulk of the games that come out for aren't really all that compelling, are they?
No, it's a shame. Apple Arcade, we were promised lots of groundbreaking games that wouldn't normally get made or get published, and we've ended up just with loads of remakes, and everything's got a plus on the end of it because that's what they seem to be doing.
Speaking of groundbreaking games, I think we can both agree that 20 years ago a groundbreaking game dropped, and that was Half-Life 2.
Yeah, followed obviously on the tails of Half-Life 1, which was amazing, and then Half-Life 2. I can't believe it's 20 years old. I'm feeling quite old. There's a lot of albums that have hit monumental birthdays, and now obviously computer games are doing the same.
By the way, if you're listening relatively up to date with this podcast, you should jump on to Steam and download this 20-year update of Half-Life 2 because it's free, as are the additional patches. So Episode 1 and Episode 2 are also free, and it's now going to have Steam Workshop support. So this is a great time to jump into the Half-Life universe.
What's Steam Workshop?
That allows modders to make new spins of the game, effectively.
Okay, that makes sense.
Or new levels. So example, Portal 2 is part of Steam Workshop. So there's like thousands of additional Portal 2 levels you can go and play because they're on Steam Workshop.
Oh, okay. That's quite cool.
It's very cool. So they may be able to do something with the Half-Life 2 engine. Half-Life 2 was famous for lots of reasons, not the least of which was it came with a Source 2 engine. It came with Valve, the Steam client itself properly. It came with 1.6. You needed 1.6 to install Counter-Strike. I think which we played back in the day, but it was Half-Life 2 that really made it a thing that you would go on, you would buy other people's games on there, you had all your updates on there and everything. This was what made Steam the big, £20 gorilla in the room. But Half-Life 2 was an incredible game. It had physics, it had the Source engine, it had updated graphics. It was such an upgrade on what was already a classic game, and I can't believe it's 20 years old either.
Yeah, and I can't believe they've not done a huge amount with the Half-Life franchise. You're not playing Half-Life 10 today, are you? And it's amazing that this is what got Steam going, and what foresight they had to do Steam like this, because I know obviously at the time Steam wasn't rated that highly, but here we are 20 years later, and Steam has done a stellar job. Don't you think of being a marketplace that sells games from lots of different companies, does a good job of bringing old game, providing a platform to bring legacy games to modern kit, and they've just done an amazing job with Steam, I think.
It is interesting, and it's a bit weird, really, for all the analysis and criticism we give Apple and Facebook and Meta and Google and all the rest to it. We kind of give Valve a pass on Steam. Both of us do. We look at it very fondly, even though I've invested a lot of time and money into it. I think because they seem to be nice guys and girls. They do have that sort of reputation for going the extra mile for the user, all their Linux support. They push back on things. But I bet there's lots of developers out there have a very serious problem with Valve and the way that they run the company.
I'm sure you're not going to be that big and not annoy some people. But considering we're very different gamers, I'm an occasional dip in and try generally retro games. You play way more games than I do. But no, I've always looked at Steam quite favourably. I think they've done a good job, and they've brought me the games I want to play. They've provided that platform for other people, and I'd rather buy something on Steam because then I know I can play it on a PC or on a Steam Deck, or sometimes a Mac. But obviously that never really went anywhere. So I'm quite happy to spend a few quid, and they have some amazing sales. We can get a lot of game for not a lot of money.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And like I say, it's free. And if you've never played Half-Life 2, go and check it out. It really is. It's probably cracking on a bit these days in terms of what people are used to with first-person shooters. But it wasn't just a first-person shooter. It was a puzzle game. It had racing elements in there as well. By the time you get the gravity gun, I mean, you can see where Portal was inspired by when you look at Half-Life 2. Unsurprisingly, also built in the Source engine. Just a terrific game. And the things that sort of came afterwards, there was a World War II first-person shooter, Team Fortress 2, all the other sort of games that came along as a consequence of the Source engine. And I'd say it kicked the development of first-person shooters and puzzle games and all this kind of stuff, as well as the marketplace that Steam brought with it. Just it gave a huge boost to PC gaming.
Yep. No, I think that's fair. It is cool. And you know what? I have not had a go in ages. I might just go and download this, just even if I just play the first bit of it, just to see what it's like.
Should work on your Mac too.
Ooh.
I would have thought so. Something that might work on your Mac, and you and I also played an awful lot of, this week, Unreal and Unreal Tournament have also been made free and are on the Internet Archive for download.
That's quite cool. Like, we talked a little bit about Nintendo the other week. We've obviously just touched on Steam bringing legacy games. It's quite cool, isn't it, that Unreal is going down the same. And obviously Unreal, again, massive cultural game, especially Unreal Tournament, which was ridiculously huge.
It was for us, wasn't it? I mean, we played an awful lot of it. You can go off and get the installer and you can download the files from the Internet Archive. Very influential in its time. And from this simple start for Unreal and Unreal Tournament, we now have Fortnite because it's the same company.
Yeah, I'm less of a fan of Fortnite, I must confess. But just because I think my kids wallow away so many hours on it. But then I would have done the same at their age.
Well, we did.
Yeah, that's fair. And they spend a lot less time looking at loading screens than we ever did, though, to be fair to them. They don't know how lucky they are.
Yeah, they don't play Call of Duty. You'd see a few then.
Oh, really?
You'd see a few then. Should we talk about another good guy in the gaming space, and that's Good Old Games?
Good Old Games. Now, I do have a couple of GOG games because I do have Theme Hospital, which I love. And I did recently download it. And it's actually in the screen grab at the top. Brilliant.
Yeah, so Good Old Games is another game selling service. They try and do it DRM free, or they may do it entirely DRM free. So should the service go away, the games will still work. You'll be able to back them up somewhere and use them. This is not always the case with Valve games. In fact, it's rarely the case with Valve games. They are all DRM content protected. For Good Old Games, you can download an old game. They also do a good service in maintaining the ability to play them on newer computers. This is a good thing. The prices are generally reasonable. In the screenshot we're currently looking at the moment, for example, System Shock 2 is only $1.99. Fallout is $2.49. The original Diablo is $10. So, yeah.
I like GOG. Like I said, I've played Theme Park Hospital. I think the problem is I've played a few legacy games. I think I sent you a screen grab of Dune 2, and on a 27-inch 4K monitor, the window's like this big, and obviously if you stretch it to full screen, everything is just a big blurry pixely mess. So sometimes I wish I had a smaller screen to play some of these on, I think, or a lower res one, because maybe I need to tweak the settings a little bit, but they haven't aged as well as you would like.
No, but I think some of the things like DOSBox can do really quite good upscaling of these older things to make them look better. If you look for the right sort of layer that sits over the top of them when it comes to emulating them, you can often get them to look quite good.
Ooh, maybe I need to do a bit more playing then, because I did fire up Dungeon Keeper and it was not beautiful. But like I say, my recommendation last week of Commandos, that's actually aged okay. If you know what I mean, it's all right. Like, it is playable and comfortable, whereas Dungeon Keeper 1 was struggling. My eyes struggled with it, if I'm being honest.
Fair enough. Should we do a main show?
Let's do it.
Probably not the longest show in the world, but I thought it would be interesting, as I'm in the process or have just reinstalled an entirely new Mac from scratch. I didn't bring anything over, hence my desktop issue from earlier, I guess, of talking about what do you install when you've got a new computer.
It's a good question, actually. And you mentioned this to me, and I was like, actually, I don't install that much. Do you know what I mean? Like, my Mac that I'm talking to you on now is very stock, because with various issues recording, I didn't want to have anything that would get in the way, if you know what I mean, and cause us problems. So I'm actually a very stock Apple person, especially on my Mac.
Fair enough. So I'm trying to keep this a little stock for the moment. As an experiment to myself, I haven't installed all the things I normally would. I haven't gone and installed Raycast or Alfred. I haven't gone and installed Firefox or Chromium or Zen Browser or any of these other things. I'm trying, for a little bit at least, just to keep it fairly stock in the sense of the applications that come with it, as I am with my work laptop as well. I haven't installed any more. I'm using Spotlight, I'm using Safari, I'm streaming Safari to you now rather than the Zen browser, which I've done. So for the viewers, you'll see that too.
Yeah, that's fair. So where are we going to start, and what are we going to install if you're getting a new Mac? Because your list will be different to mine.
So this is very dependent on what you're going to do with a Mac, and I could very quickly go down a rat hole. If I was installing my work machine, I'd be installing Jupyter Notebooks, I'd be putting newer versions of Python on, I'd have obviously Office Suite and things like that on there, but I'm going to talk about just the base of what I need to make a Mac usable, no matter what I have in mind for it, really. So the first thing that any Mac that you're gonna, and I'll try and bring it onto the screen, is gonna need is 1Password. Now, interestingly, they just emailed me during the podcast to say my annual subscription is due as well, so maybe I should be thinking about that a little bit, because there are alternatives to this. Obviously, we've talked about using Apple's password app. There's open source things like BitLocker that you can use instead, but for me, 1Password just works really well. It integrates on every single device that I want to use it. My iPhone, I've used it on Android, I've used it on Windows, I use it on a Mac, and I almost can't function without it. It's built into my muscle memory for the keyboard shortcut to bring it up. I install the browser plugins so it will integrate with all my passwords. I try and do two-factor on almost everything, or passkeys, and all of that is integrated into 1Password as well. So I just think it's an absolutely essential app that it's the first thing I will type into Safari and to go to install.
Completely agree with you. This is the one app I install: Windows, Mac, iPad, iPhone. 1Password is top of the list because I can't then get into anything else if I don't have this app.
Yep, exactly. And another Ryan Reynolds company, let's just say.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's a major investor in it.
He's an amazing entrepreneur, businessy person. Always got an amazing team, and he's a great face for it. But yeah, what a guy.
So I think 1Password is a no-brainer. It is, you and I keep talking about it, so it's obviously in our minds that we do occasionally think about alternatives for it, because it's not cheap, but it's very good.
I must confess, I work for a company that we pay for 1Password at work, and everybody that has a license at work can use it for free at home. So I am using it for free through our business account, if that makes sense, at work, which I think is a nice thing that 1Password do, because they don't have to, but it's a good way of getting you in, I guess. I think, though, for a lot of people, where Apple's going with the passwords apps is pretty good. It's still quite basic, though.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this displayed in pounds, but I can't. But it's €5.95 a month times 12. For the purchase of it, which, like I say, I pay the annual fee. I pay the family's one, so my kids can have access to like the Netflix password when they're in university. Not that works so well anymore, but that kind of thing is quite handy. You get a secure sharing link. It's just a very well built app.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a good app. It's had some heat for the way they do it on the Mac, being an Electron app, but I think they've done a pretty good job with it, to be fair to them. I don't have that many annoyances, but obviously take my Mac commentary with a pinch of salt, because I don't use my Mac all day, every day like others.
Well, I do use my Mac all day, every day, and I can live with it. I don't think it's as well made as it was back in the day when it was a native Mac app, but no Electron apps are. Please see Microsoft Teams for the worst non-native Mac on any platform, including Windows, that you've ever seen. I think we'll move on from that, though, and talk about the second thing I'd have to install, and that's Homebrew. So for me, Homebrew is absolutely essential, and the second thing I install on any Mac. It involves a couple of terminal commands. You copy and paste them from the website. You put them into your terminal on your Mac. You then have to change your path a little bit, which is a little complicated. We don't know, but it does talk you through it in the terminal when you do it. And from there, I actually can install almost every single other app on this list without having to do anything.
It's interesting because I've never really been a big Homebrew person, but that is super interesting. That's exactly what you do. And I have tried it, and I would concur that the instructions are very good.
The instructions are very good, but once you've got it, the point is you can then type brew install, and the next app I'm going to talk about is Mackie, for example. Brew install Mackie, and it just goes off and it downloads it and installs it on your Mac for you, and you're off. You don't need to go to websites, you don't need to go anything dodgy. To update it, it's brew update, brew upgrade, and it will upgrade all the packages in your system as well. And for me, it's just the simplest way to go and install things. There are even commercial things on here as well. So if you wanted to go install, say, for example, Little Snitch, which is a firewall management thing, you can go and get that with Homebrew as well. It's just a fantastically maintained app.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that.
So having said that, I went off and I did a brew install Mackie. I've talked about some of these before in App of the Week. My App of the Week will be different this week because I'm talking about lots of them in one go. Mackie is a clipboard manager, and for the life of me, I don't understand why Apple don't install a clipboard manager with the computer.
Yeah, it does feel like they've done obviously universal clipboard where you can copy something on your Mac, paste it on your iPad, but it feels like they've never really circled back to it. I'm surprised they haven't done it either.
Yeah, for the uninitiated, a clipboard will store more than just the last thing you copied, a clipboard manager. It will install, I think in Mackie's case, I'll just click, and this shouldn't appear on the video, installs the last 30 things that I had in my clipboard, including images. It doesn't store passwords because the integration's clever enough to realize it shouldn't be putting passwords in clear text unless you really want it to. You can go into the settings and do that. But every single thing that you copy is there, and the chances are you want 2 or 3 things in your clipboard at any one time when you're working on documents, when you're moving things around, and a clipboard manager gives you that. And again, Microsoft built this into Windows. Almost every Linux distribution has this built into it. What the hell are you playing at, Apple? As it is, you can buy Mackie on the App Store, or you can just do brew install, and it's an open source app as well. Fantastic little app.
Yeah, I'm with you. It looks great. I've never really used it, but I use my Macs very lightly in comparison. But the screen grab just looked fantastic.
Equally, this applies to the iPad and the iPhone. Why is there not a clipboard manager for them?
Yeah, that's fair.
You know, the OS vendor should give you a secure clipboard manager built into it. So it doesn't need to be for everyone. It can just be for the pro users. You know, Apple's, you got to make it simple is fine, but it's actually limiting. If you've got 2 or 3 websites that you want to post into an email and you're going back and forth between them, it's a real pain in the bum to do that on iOS or iPadOS.
I would concur with that statement.
Next, and this is really just for me, I could understand why nobody else would want to do this. I want a really cool looking terminal because I use the terminal quite a lot to spin up Docker containers, do my brew installs, SSH into other servers and things like that. And iTerm gives me that. I've talked about it as an app of the week before. It lets you do theming in there. It's got good clipboard history. You can record macros with it. You can do an awful lot of things with iTerm that you can't do with the inbuilt Mac terminal. So I'm just a big fan of iTerm, and I think people should have it. That's all.
Yeah, this is probably something I would never use.
Fair enough. I will move on to something that may be more relevant then. Linear Mouse. Linear Mouse is again free. You can install it with Homebrew. Upgrade for your mouse. If you don't just use a trackpad on your Mac and you have a multi-button mouse, say a Logitech MX Master 3 or something like that, and you want to make use of the extra buttons, just something as trivial as that, which again Mac OS doesn't let you do. Some mice have 5, 6, 7, 8 buttons built into them these days, and you can't do anything other than left click, right click, and scroll by standard with a Mac. This will let you map the other buttons on your mouse to other things. Like, for example, you could have one of the thumb trigger buttons to fire up Expose or something like that. So this lets you be a lot more productive with hardware that you already own without installing Logitech's junk apps on your Mac.
Yeah, that's quite cool, actually. I like the sound of this. And you commented last week that your mouse came up as a keyboard because it's got so many buttons on it. So I like the sound of this, actually. I should probably take a look.
It's really good, and the other things it gives you is it gives you better scrolling, because I've talked before about how dreadful macOS's tracking is when you move the mouse around an awful lot. But you can also do things like increase the scrolling speed. So when you roll your mouse wheel, how many lines it will go down every time you scroll. It's super slow on most Mac apps, whereas I can actually do this quite quickly because I use Linear Mouse. So Linear Mouse is a great little program.
Yeah, I do find that Apple's tracking quite slow by default.
It's dreadful. Next, grab to text. I've talked about this before. This is a little thing that lives in your menu bar, and as it says in the application, you can grab text from anything. A screenshot, a PDF document. They don't always format very well when you're trying to select text inside of a PDF document. They can, jump down lines, miss out words, paste oddly in the sense that they'll grab things from the right-hand side of a split-page document. Grab to text fixes most of that for you and will let you grab text out of anything. It's free. It sits in your menu bar. It's a great application.
Yep, no, it looks quite good, and I've experienced that formatting problem that you've just mentioned because it's all depend on how it's been built underneath.
Absolutely. For me, I've become a bit of a fan of Mastodon. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about Mastodon next week, and Blue Sky. Blue Sky is a bit of a resurgence at the moment. I'm a big believer in Tapbots. They make terrific apps. They made the best Twitter client. They made the original Twitter client with the bird, in fact. And for me, I make use of Ivory's Mastodon app on my Mac and on my iOS device, and it's a terrific application.
Yeah, I use it a little bit on iOS. I'm largely a consumer, not a poster, but it's a great app. These guys do amazing apps.
And I hope that they branch out and do a Blue Sky app, actually, given the sudden popularity that it seems to have in the community. I don't know how easy it is to develop those things. They've been burned before. This is why the Icon Factory are developing Tapestry, which works with lots of things, not just one thing. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, not a free app. You do need to pay for it, and it's not that cheap. I think it's about £25 for a year, but I think it's worth it, and I want to support a good developer.
Yeah, we've got to support our developers.
support your developers. Next, Raindrop, also not a free app, but there is a free version of it, which is what I'm using. I use this all day, every day to store the links for this podcast and for interesting bookmarks. It's built into my workflow. If I read a story, I will tap it. It automatically gets added to Raindrop. I think it might be an Electron app on the Mac, but it doesn't bother me that much. You can entirely run it from the web browser as well. It supports sign-in with Apple. You can put things into tabs, so I can remove things from... I can have a work-based thing or a home server or for this podcast. It's well organized. It's just a nice app that works really well.
Makes sense. It looks good. Have you stopped using Bridges?
Bridges broke for me, the iCloud syncing. And I don't blame the developer of Bridges. Bridges is a better app than this. But I couldn't trust it because all my bookmarks has vanished into the iCloud black hole. And that's a real problem, not for the developer and for Apple. Apple, because they can't build a consistent syncing engine. But for the developer, because he couldn't give me any support on that. So I can't trust it. I went for a product that I knew would work 100% of the time.
Yeah, I struggled a little bit with it, I must confess, and I only used it quite lightly.
Yeah, but Bridges is a great app. We featured it. It was an app of the week. The developer actually gave us a shout out for talking about it. Jonathan Ruiz, I think, is the developer. Fantastic app. And I think if I hadn't... Well, actually, I don't know why it didn't work. I installed a new device and all my iCloud bookmarks went away and they're still not back. And every time I try and use Bridges again, because I'd like to, it just vanishes into the ether. It's got to be an iCloud problem. I don't know how to diagnose it and fix it. I know a little bit about Macs and computers. I don't know how to diagnose and fix it.
Yeah. No, I've had this with a very different app that it worked and then it just stopped working. It was a Formula One tracking app of scores and everything, and it just disappeared, and the developer didn't know why, and I just gave up with it.
Yeah, it worked and then it didn't, and that's a real problem for for developers in Apple.
Agreed.
And last but not least, one of your recommendations, Reader. I have used NetNewsWire for many years. I had a bit of a same problem with it with iCloud and syncing, so I thought I'd try out Reader. It does still use iCloud and syncing, to my knowledge, so I'm a bit worried it'll stop working at some point, so I'm sort of dummying up in Tapestry at the same time as Reader, but Reader's a great app, and it does, I should say what some of these apps do, I think I have been. It uses RSS to sync all your feeds into one place. RSS is the protocol that this podcast is published with, but also news agencies quite often put out RSS feeds of updated articles as they come along. So my workflow is I'll read a story in Reader. If it's one I like, I'll add it to my Raindrop list, and then I'll be able to build the show notes for this podcast as the week goes on.
Do you know what? I love this app. I opened it up on my iPad the other day and I was like, what a beautiful app, because it doesn't just look like other apps. I think they've done a really nice job, especially on the iPad, and you probably get it on the Mac where you have the 3-pane view and you've got a nice curve on it, and it just, I don't know, I just think it's a really nice app. And unlike NetNewsWire, where I had to mark things as read, this just assumes once you've scrolled through the list, you've read them. There's no markers read and unread. And for me, it works really well, and big thumbs up.
I would like an unread count, though. I would like to know how many stories I've got left to read.
I'm quite happy with not having that. For me, this is ideal, but I can see why you might want it, and they could do it as an option, but I'd like it to be optional, not mandated. I think they've done quite a cool job of reinventing it. I think it's quite cool.
I agree, and it's why I use it. It's a pretty app. It does what I need it to do, and it syncs reliably, and that's fine. But I have the fear that iCloud is going to break it.
Yeah, I can understand that. I just like that they've done a different thing with the aesthetic. I think that's quite cool, because a lot of apps just look the same these days. That is a problem we've got, I think, with symbols and all of the free stuff you get in a Swift UI app. A lot of the apps you open them up and like, this looks like every other app I use. The toolbars all look the same. Do you know what I mean? And I think I like that they've done something a bit different.
Yep, I think that's fair. I could go on and say for podcasting I have OBS and Audio Hijack, or if it was work I'd install Zoom and Office and Slack, but I won't, because I think that's just the basics. I can be productive just with that. So what about you and an iPad?
Yeah, I think that's fair. So iPad-wise, not a million miles away from yourself. So 1Password is the go-to. Any new device, 1Password, because I can't get into anything without it. So 1Password makes a lot of sense. I've then put email just separately because I was having a lot of frustrations with the Mail app, and I would recommend people probably try Outlook for their personal email. I just found the Mail app rubbish at categorizing junk and customizing notifications, but I don't use Outlook for personal email. I use it for work. So if you're using your iOS device for work purposes, I install Outlook, I have Teams, I have all the Microsoft suite of stuff on my iPad, and to be fair to Microsoft, I think they do a pretty good job of embracing the iPad, keeping those apps relatively up to date. They did struggle with Teams and third-party camera support or an additional camera, which they've now corrected. And I can't rave about the Microsoft apps enough. They've really carried on iterating the apps slowly, and I think they're really good. And I do all my work on my iPad every day of the week. And I live in Microsoft land, and I think OneDrive's very good, and the apps they're providing are very good. So I would recommend. Back though to personal needs, one thing I do use on my iPad is the iNewspaper. It's a great newspaper here in the UK. It's very short, which is their thing. I like it. Rod's just pulled a face. I know he's a Guardian reader, but I really like the i because it's got lots of snippets of news.
I'm not pulling a face because it's the News. I'm pulling a face because the advertising on it is obscene.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can understand that. Do you know why I like it? I like the short articles, and I like all the puzzles, and the app's pretty good. The annoying thing with the puzzles in the app is you get the app as a newspaper, which is what I want. I want to subscribe to a newspaper and have a digital, in essence, PDF of it, and I often just screen grab the puzzles and then use my Apple Pencil to do the puzzles because I quite enjoy that at the end of the day just to relax. But I like the reporting, and I like the snappiness of the articles. Sometimes you read some articles and they just go on and on and on, and there's a lot of, it feels like they're trying to hit a word count rather than just tell you the salient points. So I like that, and the subscription for an annual digital subscription, £20 a year when they're on sale, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. I don't read it every day, but I love it on my iPad, an 11-inch iPad that you just grab in your hand, hold, you can do the puzzles, you can read it. It's really good.
So, I don't know if you can see this, but I presume these big grey areas here are adverts.
Yep.
Yeah. Look at all the advertising cookies it's sending. Fallback, Facebook, Google Analytics, Facebook. You know, that's the only reason I pulled a face.
No, I can understand that. So for me, though, I don't really use that part of it. I don't use the website. I just use the app to go to the newspaper to get what is in essence a PDF version of the newspaper. I don't really read the HTML content, as it were. I use BBC News or Apple News for that. I then also install the Apple Office suite, so Numbers, Pages and Keynote. So I keep all my work in Microsoft land and I keep all my personal life in Apple land. I think for me it's a great way. I like having one device for work and home, but I segregate off very much. Microsoft is everything to do with my day job. I don't mix the two, and I use the Apple suite for everything to do with my personal stuff. We've already touched on the Reader app. I install that all the time. I love it. It's my quick way of just going, right, what news do I want to consume, largely for tech and some personal blogs. It's just such a good app, as Rod's already touched on. And then finally, the big bit for the iPad for me is I use it a lot for streaming and watching content. So I use the Apple TV app a lot, and I haven't really touched on the Apple apps. I use pretty much all the built-in apps, music, TV, etc. But for me, the iPlayer app, the Channel 4 app, they're all fantastic. You can download and cache things, you can stream. And for me, the iPad's a big streaming device. You know, if I'm in the kitchen cooking, I might just have it on the side and put something on that I want to watch. If I'm on the train or going on a flight, my iPad's with me, and it will have the iPlayer on it, Amazon Prime, and the Channel 4 app, and Disney Plus, really. And I just think those apps are really good, and the iPad is a great content consumption device, as we know. So that's what I use.
Fair enough. I'm not going to add anything to that. I can't really say much about iPad stuff. I will use it for streaming, but only when I'm traveling. Other than that, it's just a content consumption device. So I'm quite glad we had that balance between what you use an iPad for and I do. I could probably get by, except for work, without Outlook and all these things, because I'd largely just use the Google suite of apps, as we do for this podcast, because they're good enough for most people. And LibreOffice, for those that don't want to install a corporately managed thing, is actually extremely good these days, but don't tend to install them as default. If I was doing a Linux list, they'd be on there.
Yeah, the one thing I must say, though, when I go back and use my Mac, I struggle sometimes with the lack of apps. Like, I'm like, oh, I want to watch iPlayer. Where's the app? And it's like, oh, no, I don't need an app. I go in and use the web browser. Because I've been on the iPad for so long as my primary device, my mind struggles sometimes when I go back to the Mac of, oh no, everything's not in an app. It's a web site in essence.
Yeah, I think that's part of my problem with the iPad really, and Apple, the way that they are appifying us rather than, taking away from the freedom of the web. But that's a whole different thing. No, that's good. I think we both had good solid lists there. Should we do an app of the week?
Yeah, let's do it.
So it's not an app of the week, and I've hinted at it already. I've done enough apps this week. I purchased a Logitech MX Master 3S mouse to go on my new desk setup. I bought a white one to go on my new desk setup, and I'm pleased with it. Same mouse I have at work. I think it's a good mouse. I like the scroll wheel on it. Linear mouse makes it better on the Mac, the fact that I can make use of the buttons and things. So now at my desk I have a Magic Trackpad. I have my Keychron K3 Mac Series keyboard, and I have my Logitech Master MX 3S, and I'm very happy with them all.
I have 2 comments. I like the MX Master 3, and I did pick mine up. I haven't got the S. I think that's the silent one. I've just got the 3 from a long, long time ago before it went USB-C. What a great device. It's been around for a long time. The only thing I really noticed when I used it the other week, it felt quite chunky. It's a big old mouse. To me, because I've got so used to using the Magic Mouse, and I'm going to hold it up now, I've got a Logitech MX Anywhere 3. And this one's a 3S actually. I think this is a really good mouse. It's USB-C, supports 3 devices, very similar to your MX Master. But for me, it's just that bit smaller. And I think, again, like where I've used an iPad for so long, I've used a small mouse for so long, I struggle with the MX Master. And this is a great one, pocket in your bag. It's just really nice. Works well with the iPad and the Mac, obviously.
Fair enough. I don't need a mouse when I travel. My laptop has got a trackpad, so I'm quite happy.
So's my iPad, but I find the trackpad just a bit small, and sometimes I like just to sit with the mouse.
Yeah, iPad trackpad is too small. I didn't pay this, by the way, for the MX Master 3S. I found an eBay seller selling them new for, I think it was $54. I paid for it, so I felt like I got a good deal on it too.
That's fair enough. That's quite a good price. Like I say, that mouse has been around forever. It feels like they've hit the pinnacle of design. I wonder if they're ever going to do a 4. I would have expected it by now, because I think this has been going for, I don't know, this has got to be going pre-pandemic, this mouse. So it's had a long tenure.
Fair enough. I can't show the last story on our thing because Audible wants me to sign in, so I'm not doing that. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I can. There we go.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm hoping it doesn't want you to sign in. So I'll tell you about my thing of the week. So, and the reason obviously I re-picked Commanders last week is I try and just pick on something this week that's meant something to me. And this week there was this book, Believe, and it's a little bit of the story about behind the Ted Lasso show and how it got on our screens and some of the history and various quotes from people. It's not the best book in the world, but equally it's very much not the worst book in the world. And it's just got a little bit of an insight. I'm partway through it. I have an Audible account, so these books don't cost me very much money in essence. So I instantly downloaded it and thought I'd give it a go. And actually, I'm just quite enjoying it. It's about 10 hours long. Obviously, if you speed up the book, it'll be quicker. But it's just had some insights of basically how long it took to actually get it made, because they sat on it for a long time and they were doing other projects, and obviously it's largely driven by Jason Sudeikis. They mentioned some of the casting of actually some other people were going to play different roles, and just all the process they went through, and how it feels like it was quite organic as it morphed and people joined the writing team and different actors and what have you, and just quite an interesting book on a TV show I love. So it's kind of made me want to go and watch it again, but I've watched that series so many times I can't go back and watch it again. I need to watch Silo and other things. But just quite an interesting book. Amazed we haven't had one before this, because obviously you'd have thought this might have got released around season 3 or something when they were trying to promo it. But interesting to come out now. But yeah, would recommend if you've got an Audible subscription. It doesn't cost a huge amount of money. It's probably not worth the $12.99 it's going for if you don't have a subscription.
Fair enough. Good recommendation. I still think Ted Lasso is just Major League, though.
They do reference that in the book.
Do they?
They do reference that in the book, that it is a take on Major League, which is a film from the 80s or 90s, which I've never seen. And actually, I probably should go watch Major League now so I can actually comment on it better. I
think you should. 1989. American sports
80s, 90s, I was pretty close with that. But yeah, film I've never seen. And I didn't know anything about it, so I should probably go watch it. It's an interesting cast, looking at it on Wikipedia.
It's a very 80s film, but it's a good one.
Yeah, and it does feel like they've lifted some of the story.
Totally. I think we call that a show, Chris.
We can. So if anyone wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@marston.scot. I'm at _CGP at marston.social. You can watch on YouTube if you go to waitfromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link. Or you can drop us an email, waitfromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.